So when that language was removed, a lot of people were uncertain to the integrity of that decision.
You're about to watch an episode from the Periodic Effects podcast. You can also listen on any podcast app or download our custom app in the App Store on your phone. Just search Periodic Effects or go to periodiceffects.com. Now let's get into the episode. Awesome. Well, joining us today is Brock Binder. He's a founder and chief experience officer at High Quality and High Quality Life Brands. And excited to have you on today, Brock, and cover Measure 109 that got recently passed in Oregon around using psilocybin for medical use and treatment. And it's going to be very interesting going into the future and what this might look like. And Oregon really pioneering, being the first, almost that leap California took in medical cannabis, and then Colorado took in recreational cannabis. Being the first is exciting, but it's also can be risky and unknown. So thank you for taking some time. And how have you been as we get near end 2020 with business, life, everything in general as we wrap up the year?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very privileged to be having this conversation right now, and excited that we're discussing this topic. So that gave some great news as we end the year, and I think that 2020 is going to be a mark that everyone remembers. But I think we'll find in good time that we'll look back at this moment and see how much it grew us each as individuals and our businesses despite the adversities.
Yeah.
So, yeah, looking forward to starting fresh in 2021.
Exactly. Yeah. For all the downsides, there's definitely been a lot of upsides too, or just different dynamics and what we're going to talk about today. So there is stuff to look forward to or be excited about. And I think to start off, just for listeners, I'm guessing most people probably don't know the context of this or what it means exactly. So I want to start by asking, were you surprised this got passed? And I know you're helped with the campaign, and what was the campaign like, and kind of how do we get up to this point, just to give listeners some context?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to give all the credit to Sam Chapman and the team behind Measure 109 and IP34. This was something that, is obviously a ground roots effort that, was posed with a little bit of adversity with the COVID climate. So, they were extremely active in taking, Tom and Sherry Eckert. They were the creators of IP34, and they partnered to get this drafted. And they are two psychologists with a belief that this should be a human right to have. And so, it started with their idea. They partnered with Sam and brought this forward. Sam had a lot of great experience in politics and getting bills to be moved forward. And it was just, a great collective of individuals working behind the scenes that I think anyone would know are, so active. It was weekly calls every Wednesdays to get everyone, up to speed and on par and collaborating with, films like Fantastic Fungi and Dosed and, just doing the best word to get that word out there. And I think as soon as, there were some larger collective endorsements such as Paul Stamets and Dr. Bronner, those names just brought a lot of credibility, I think, to what they were doing here in Oregon. So was I surprised? Yeah, because Oregon, we didn't pass this initially with cannabis. It took a few runs. So, I was optimistic, but to think that something on its first run being introduced it was going to come through, I wasn't sure. But the effort that Sam put forward as a leader to campaign this, he got everyone behind this to ensure they were making the calls necessary. When COVID hit, he stepped up and said, there's no further regret than noticing that you were only a couple votes behind. Mm-hmm. So we got to do everything we can, calling people and getting the word out to educate them on what this is going to do.
Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't follow the campaign super closely, but I thought, well, this is great that it's coming to be voted upon, but maybe the second or the third time, like you mentioned with cannabis. So, I mean, that's amazing to see. And I want to get into the potential benefits and what the system and facilities might look like. But on the voting on this bill and from the side of opposition, was there a strong opposition? I did see some videos on the news with like certain people that were kind of against it. Was there a lot of that, or was there surprisingly little? And what were their kind of main points or sticking points as we go forward now that it is legalized?
Yeah, absolutely. Surprisingly, it was disproportionately low on the opposition side. There really wasn't a strong force. The most of the opposition I feel came when at a point it was recognized that a all out like homegrown use or to outright legalize mushrooms, they weren't confident in the language and getting the bill passed. So when that language was removed, a lot of people were uncertain to the integrity of that decision. And so, what came up out that arose from that, though, is 110. So 110 kind of stepped up and, they believed that, psilocybin services should be kind of for ceremonial benefit, communities abroad, trade, open free market. And that was very different from the 109 model, which is much more of a clinical based approach based on proven statistics. So again, both hold their own, and I'm actually really excited that they both happen together.
Yeah,
I think it's going to open up a lot more opportunities for those to give this a try. And because some people might not be comfortable, going to a clinician. But the idea of this is to make this a regulated market well enough to ensure that people are taken care of and from a public health perspective. So that's what, when you make something like this, you have to, do your best to demonstrate that we're taking a public health approach and ensuring that this isn't going to get in the hands of, who it shouldn't be. And that we are looking at this in a patient's first perspective.
Yeah. So 109 focusing more on medicinal use in patients, and then 110 might have overlap around psilocybin. I'm not really sure, but does that mean, like, you mentioned growing at home or at home use? Will that not be a part of the system going forward? Will you have to go into a facility and a physician, essentially?
That's correct. So neither of 109 or 110 address the issue of if you would like to consume in your own home. That won't be allowed at this time. You will have to go to a service center. And those, from my understanding as of right now, and the rules kicking off in January, there's going to be a board to start making decisions on this kind of stuff over a 2-year rulemaking process. But as it stands, from my understanding, 1,000 feet away from a school, similar to how cannabis retail dispensary rules were, and that it couldn't be at a home. So, that could leave room for EFU, exclusive farm use, so that you can still have that in a forest. And those are some of the things that I want to see advocated for over the course of these next 2 years, is that we give this a broad enough opportunity to, because set and setting is what dictates everyone's experience. And, we want to ensure that there's enough room for those who want to have their experience to bond in nature, or if they would like to have more of an enclosed setting, they can have that opportunity as well.
Yeah. And so the framework right now is the Oregon Health Authority is going to run the program. They were the same organization for people outside of Oregon that did our medical cannabis program initially before we went recreational. And their timeline essentially is they have 2 years. So is it like 2023 in December to officially having to have started handing out the license and have the program go live? Is that our current timeline goal, I suppose?
That's correct. Yeah. So there's going to be a two-year rulemaking period that's going to employ, a large range of about 15 different individuals to bring their perspective to make recommendations to the Oregon Health Authority. Basically, the Oregon Health Authority can say and make any decision they want. The whole idea of this is to make recommendations to guide this in the right way. And from my understanding, the way this will work is that will become effective in January of 2021. They'll have made their decisions on who is that going to be on that board. There'll be monthly meetings, and then they should be beginning to accept applications and process those applications January of 2023.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and I have a lot of detailed questions I'm curious about, and there's probably a lot of unknown still as the OHA makes these rules. But from a higher level view, there's the law that was passed, and then there's how it's interpreted and made into regulations and the rules and what the program looks like. Is there a feeling that it will be more of a highly restricted program and maybe only licensed physicians, or won't be many of them, or it'll be difficult to start or have a facility, or will it be a little more like medical where more people can do it? They'll still have good regulations, but it's not so hyper restrictive. Do we have a feeling around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way it's going to work, just a sec. So you can obtain up to one product manufacturing license and up to 5 service centers. Okay. So per license type. And so let's use me as an example. So I'm an Oregonian. I've lived here in the state for 2 years. And so I have a residency benefit in which I would be able to start a psilocybin service business as long as I remained 51% owner or more, being the Oregonian. So that until January 1st of 2025, out of state owners would not be allowed. An Oregonian must be a 51% dominant owner in this.
Got it.
And I could obtain up to 5 different facilities and up to 1 manufacturing or processing license.
Okay. And so you won't have to be vertically integrated. You don't have to have like a manufacturing and like Washington did, where you had to grow and process. You'll be able to own those separately. Do we know?
Yeah, the way this is designed, it's just restrictions on multiple licenses are, it does not say requirements as far as having to have both.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's the manufacturer, service center, there'll be a license to be a facilitator, and then licenses for laboratories.
Okay. And it sounds like with this setup, if there's no at-home use and you have to come into a facility, I've been thinking about the psilocybin, and you think about how cannabis evolved and what consumers are looking for and what's best for them. And there's kind of the higher dose experience that's more, I see, as like sitting down with a therapist and really going through a strong experience. And then there's kind of the microdose category that people, it's gained popularity, they might use more occasionally, but it sounds like that microdose scenario in the license system won't really be an option because there's no prescription to take the product home. Is that the case?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is the position I want to advocate for the most, is ensuring the barrier to entry is as low as possible for those who want to experience the benefits of psilocybin. You know, when you look at this, and there is an understanding that they want to make this as accessible as possible, but you know, a licensed facilitator is going to have to do a preliminary questionnaire with the patient to ensure just a few basic criteria that this is set up well and right for them. Then there's going to be the actual therapy session, and then you have to do a post or offer to the patient a post integration. So you know, you do the math on that, and that's quite a bit of time. That could get expensive. So I'm fully advocating that we look at the science behind the inebriation period, let's call it, of microdosing psilocybin. And I hope that we can provide enough evidence to support that a patient should be able to come into a center to consume that under the supervision of a licensed professional. However, they shouldn't be required to stay at that facility, you know, past a period that we would deem them acceptable to drive, or if they could prove that they had reliable transportation. Because microdosing is such, from my experience and others that I've worked with, is a great way to assist in neuroplasticity and get the benefits without having to undergo significant neurological changes immediately, not to the degree of which, you know, a 2.5 to 3 gram, 1 gram dose even can do.
Right. And if the only system is to come into a session and you have to be there and there's a post, the microdose, I mean, they're not going to come in, you know, twice a week or 3, you know, especially if it gets expensive like that.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Around the facility and the service provider, I don't know if it would be called a therapist technically, but how How are you thinking about that? And then maybe the rules might look. It seems like a very difficult thing to figure out because you have someone come in that can really have a life-altering experience. Who's the person and what are like the qualifications or process for guiding that? Like, are they sitting with them the whole time? Do they meet for a half hour and they're left for a couple hours on their own? Like, do we have any idea of how that might work or what the rules might say?
Yeah, so the rules in particular are going to be determined over the next 2 years by a group of qualified individuals. But what I can tell you is the license type that you'd be pursuing if you were interested in offering these services is going to be a licensed facilitator. And those facilitators must be 21 years of age or older with a high school diploma or equivalent. Okay. They must complete an education and training approved by the Oregon Health Authority. They're going to have to pass an examination approved by the OHA, and they're also going to be subject to code of professional conducts and ethics. And then the client on that side, 21 years of age or older, must have a facilitator, and no medical preconditions are required, which okay. I think that is very good. What are those going to look like when it comes down to the education training, the exam, and the code of professional conducts and ethics? I can tell you from the broad array, if you go to the Oregon Health Authority website for accepting applications for the Psilocybin Advisory Board, you're going to see a list of, about 20 different individuals that are going to be comprised in this board. They're going to help contribute. And one really exciting one is a person of the member of the public. So someone who's willing to hear the needs of individuals as they voice them and stay active to listening to the progress that goes on month by month and voice those so that those can be brought into these discussions.
Yeah. Yeah, that will be interesting to see what the training and education program looks like. And then it sounds like there might be a lot of room for the facilitator to set up their program how they want, more flexibility there. Because especially on psilocybin, you're talking about potentially 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. That's a big window of time, especially if they have to be there that whole time of, what do you fill that with? Are there activities? I almost picture like a YMCA with like also a therapist room that you can go out and shoot basketball at the end if you want, Is there a lot of, you think the facilitators we'll see a lot of different types of programs that will be tested and tried out?
Yeah. I have to imagine that as long as you can prove that you are completing the process. So again, you have to complete a preparation, you have to complete the administration, and you must offer integration. So again, the client must attend with a facilitator before each administration session, and there's a solicitation of the information about the client, including identification of risk factors and any contradictions, health and safety warnings. So the facilitator must certify completion of preparation before they can get into integration. Okay. So again, hopefully after that's been completed and there's been proven success of that, hopefully they wouldn't have to come every single time. Let's say microdosing does get consumed, or that's an expedited process based on them already completing that preparation session, depending on, again, the amount of psilocybin that person's going to be ingesting.
Right.
During the administration session, they'll purchase, consume, and experience the effects of the psilocybin product. Again, must occur at the Psilocybin Service Center. The facilitator must be present throughout the entire process. And the facilitator must, again, certify completion of the administration. Once that's been completed, again, they must offer integration, and the client may, but not need to participate. They can choose that I would not like to do with the integration. It must be offered though. If the client participates, again, the facilitator must certify that has been completed.
Okay. So after that first introduction session, it sounds like there might be potential use to take the product home or microdose later, but they're still necessarily figuring that out, or if it would have to always happen inside the facility.
Yeah, as it is right now, unless something drastic or something changes throughout the rulemaking process, it would have to occur at that center.
Okay. I wanted to kind of get into the science, and there's different strains of mushrooms. Before we jump over there specifically on the product side and manufacturing, do you have any feelings of what that might look like? With the facility being such the key hub for it to all to happen, I almost picture the beginning being like, there's just really, do you need more than just this strain that we grow in Oregon? And really the facilities will be the businesses that are more dynamic, and the manufacturing side won't really be as, it's necessary, but not as big of a demand or the diversity we see like in cannabis is when it comes to the products.
Yeah, because they prohibit branding and the marketing of individual products, you might see a demand for certain administration methods, such as a tea or a gummy or a tincture. So that is going to be, I think, the peak of what you're going to see is the brand category. Not as much that you're going to see, I'm hesitant to believe that you'll see, like, for example, one of the most powerful ones that I'm aware of, albino penis envy ape. I don't think you're going to see that being marketed. Right. And you might just see a generic name like APE18. Right. I think they're going to try to keep it so that that's not the primary reason for someone taking this. And I'm sure there's a lot of psychological reasons behind that. And so beyond some other goals, but right. Yeah, we won't see it like the cannabis model. It's going to be very different in terms of that. But when the science comes in there, we do know that, like full spectrum, I think that blends and the integrity of how those are grown are going to play a huge role into the energetics of the mushrooms. So I hope that we see a differentiation so that manufacturers, we can maybe have different classifications of those manufacturers. They're not going to allow outdoor growing of mushrooms. However, in my experience using them, I feel that the intention of the grower can go into the intention of the medicine sometimes. So, that's something that I would hope to advocate for. And if I were to pursue this, is to be able to give the confidence to the patients that I'm working with that the medicine that they are using is intentionally produced. But can I say that? I don't know yet. Right. It might just be this generic labeling.
Yeah, and it gets into the question of like full spectrum, to use that term, from cannabis. And if, pharma were to take psilocybin, and they probably are, they're going to work on the isolate version like we saw for THC on the cannabis side. And there's probably still a lot that needs to be studied and known in potency testing or other compounds of, are we really just looking at one molecule, or does the mushroom have 10, 20, like cannabis, hundreds potentially of potential molecules that really influence its effects? And when you're talking about a medicinal application, that's really important to not just use an isolate or a singular option when there's variants potentially.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's going to have to start sooner than later is the ability to be able to source that and get these tested so that we can start to identify. Because if we're trying to create a model where we can create some sort of consistency for patients in some way, you're going to want to understand those variances. And I'm excited because from everything I understand about this model, they protected the integrity of the physical mushroom itself, and that we're not just restricted to the chemical compound of psilocybin. Right. So yeah, that's it's a good question to pose, and I hope that we can see that we are allowed the diversity that we know, and I'm sure science is going to encourage that we look into that.
Yeah, and then the last one on the manufacturing side, if my feeling is that I take a lot of correlation from cannabis, I wonder what will be similar and what will be different, as we both spend a lot of time in the cannabis industry, with the facilities being that key hub. Unlike cannabis, if it's one session, or even if they're going home to microdose, I assume the volume or consumption is going to be much, much lower than cannabis. And I'm curious if on the manufacturing side, it's not really going to be a huge demand, at least for a while, as far as like business opportunities. A lot more people focus on the facilities because one person might take 2 grams twice a year. Maybe they take a little more than that if the microdose is allowed, but not to the levels of cannabis, gram pound consumption we've seen. Do you feel like that?
Correct. Yeah, I do feel that if this was something that was allowed to be taken home, there would be a significant increase in the consumption. I'm aware of several individuals that use this to treat pain. They use it as a substitute for alcohol. They basically, take a, 0.3, as a nightcap, and so those are, aspects that aren't encouraged under this model. So just going back to the manufacturing process and the science of what we've seen from a benefit to consumers is that someone can experience the benefits after one session for 3 months, several months, and they say, hey, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
But what they might come back for is saying, hey, if it is reasonable for me not to have to wait here for 4 hours and I can come in and get my microdose, take it here under the supervision of the professional.
Mm-hmm.
And the restriction is I must wait, 45 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever that is and go home. Okay, then it's just like going to a coffee shop and doing that and drinking your coffee there and reading your news and then going on with your day.
Yeah.
I hope to see that. And I believe in that. And what I know about microdosing model is many, from recommended from Paul Stamets and different experts in the field, that 0.1, 5 days on, 2 days off has been a recommended microdosing model. And then transitioning, they'll do that for a couple months, and then they'll transition to about 2 to 3 times a week, and then as needed. Mm-hmm. And so, that's respecting this plant as well. It's mushrooms are a teacher, and they don't always give you what you want, but they'll give you what you need. Mm-hmm. And it's good that we share this respect in a way that allows us to participate and get the outcome that we're looking for. And I don't think a dependency model is going to happen here. I do feel that many individuals who experience the benefits will be able to go without it for some time. And that's what that integration period is about as well. It's supposed to, okay, oh my gosh, I just had this profound breakthrough experience. How do I make meaning of this? Mm-hmm. And that facilitator is going to be responsible for ensuring that you have the best, post-experience period to help guide you through this newfound wisdom that you might not know what to do with.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost feels like there might eventually be 2 categories of facilities: the profound experience where it's the full session, and then after that, and maybe it all happens at the same facility, but a microdose setup where someone can come in, especially if there's enough studies or it's proven enough that 0.1 grams can be taken, like you stop in for a coffee, stop in, take it, and then leave immediately afterwards, because even sticking around for an hour does not function for most people's days, right?
Right.
But where that might be accepted. Is there any fear? I could also see how that would be attacked if there was opposition. They'd say, well, look, it is addictive. They need this microdosing thing set up so they can keep getting it, because once, if they were going to try to remarket that. And I was curious leading into that if there's any fear or concern of what happened when California went first with the medical market, that there could potentially be the federal government being really against this, and being the first state to do it might actually get some visitors from the federal government.
Absolutely. No, it's going to take cooperation to create something that is attractive to our, attorney general. Mm. I think it's something that, we have to understand that, the same thing what we did with cannabis is we had, discourage diversion, so this is going to be tracked under, I'm not sure if it's going to be the metric system, but there is going to be a tracking requirement, for example, to ensure that this is going to be something that's
spore to sale tracking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Spore to sale. Again, there's going to be packaging, labeling, and dosage requirements, testing requirements, no outdoor manufacturing, and their OHA, they may impose quantity limits. And so those are a lot of the, requirements that are going to be under for the manufacturers. And so, I obviously we want the least amount of federal intervention as possible. We want to demonstrate that we can oversee this in a way that is effective. But that the reason that we're doing this is because we recognize in Oregon that there is a mental health crisis. 1 in 5 individuals suffer some sort of, mental health challenge. And Oregon is on the very bottom for how we've offered relief for these mental health services. So you have, the statistics are on the wall of why we're doing this, and now it's just a matter of how do we do this in a manner that doesn't cause any additional harm to anyone else who wouldn't like to be participating in this.
Yeah. I think one big difference, too, when California moved forward with cannabis, there wasn't really any support at the federal level or from the FDA. And now I think it was the FDA, right, that classified psilocybin as a potential breakthrough therapy, and they want to fast track it. And I think that that's fast track it on the pharma side. But to have that kind of statement kind of changes the context of the environment at the federal level. Was it the FDA that made that statement, or do you know much about that and how that kind of came about?
Yep, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration did that.
Okay.
Yep, yeah. They said that psilocybin therapy may demonstrate substantial improvement over available therapies. So they are saying this is significantly better than what we have. They did grant psilocybin as a breakthrough therapy designation for 2 separate studies. In 2018, it was treatment-resistant depression, and in 2019, major depressive order disorder. So, that is very different, where they have still said that they haven't recognized any medicinal benefit for cannabis. So they are clearly acknowledging, which is crazy.
Yeah. Do you know how that happened? Because if anything, psilocybin is a little further out of the mainstream acceptance of cannabis. They still haven't said anything about cannabis, but psilocybin, it's like they're being progressive or proactive. Do we have any idea why they acknowledge those studies? Because cannabis has similar studies, but that aren't being acknowledged. Any idea behind that, of what made them kind of come forward with that? Because that's kind of unexpected to me that they would.
That's a great question to the powers that be. I think this is something that, we have to continue to work with Earl Blumenauer, to kind of discover our effective approaches to the whys behind the whats. I think we can all have our theories about what's happened historically and why the things they are the way they are with cannabis specifically, because they have been such a larger history of our culture. But yeah, I don't have a clear answer as to why, other than my own assumptions.
Yeah, I hear you there.
Yeah.
Over to the science side, I know there's a lot of different strains of mushrooms, and as far as I know, I don't know much about the compounds difference between the strains, but they grow different, they look different. But cannabis, you see that too. Sativa, indica grow different and look different, but they might actually have the same compounds of THC or maybe certain terpenes. So right now, with what we know, are the different strains of mushrooms potentially different compounds, or could they look like one's really tall and fat and one's really small and skinny, but actually have the same effects? Do we know much about the different strains or how those might be different?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen them growing in many different methods, and the way they grow can be similar to cannabis in the way that, if there's not enough oxygen or there's not enough light, there are X, Y, and Z variables is going to have a phenotypical different expression. But at the base, chemovars, that this is going to be predisposed to grow a certain way. So we do notice mushrooms like I brought up albino penis envy that has a much larger stalk and stem. It's a much more chunky and stout mushroom compared to your alkabenzi, your standard cyanescent or other types of mushrooms. So what I don't know is that if there is a significant differentiation in the different benefits of, in mushrooms there's beta glucans and, polysaccharides and, B vitamins, all different things that are great, that I think do influence how that medicine is working with you. Just as we look at full spectrum and the rest of the cannabinoids, it's these things work together to produce a particular effect. And how does that relate from your stem to cap ratio? I'm aware of some people who just prefer caps, just prefer stems, and some people who feel, with the blue streak in there, that's the psilocybin in there. But until we get to testing this, I'm not aware of what is going on, but based on user experiences, we are seeing a deviation between particular strains and particular potencies.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if it's almost like a dose window where like THC isolate can work, but it has a very narrow target to hit. If it goes too high, the negative side effects are more odds that those will be greater, and too low won't work. And when you go full spectrum, the way it's been explained to me is it gives you more dose variability, increases your odds of having a better experience overall, even if your THC dose isn't like super on point. And so maybe an isolate psilocybin versus a full spectrum mushroom, it just increases the odds for a better therapeutic experience versus getting that dose wrong. That's a just like an edible, right? If the dose is wrong, too high, someone's not ready, the set and setting are wrong, there can be a negative experience from consuming.
So yeah, and what's really important for us to try to wrap our mind around is trying to understand that there are no bad trips. There's just experiences that we might not have presented meaning to yet. So we might not have, we wanted to just have this experience, but the more you try to control the experience with psilocybin, that's why these guides have to be trained in a way to understand that you're there to facilitate the experience. You are not there to control this experience. It's extremely important to recognize that, because the more that you try to fight, the teacher, she's going to give you a lesson, and it might be presented in a way that could be perceived as bad, but she's just trying to redirect you to get back on track. Mm-hmm. And so that's the way that I look at it. So again, it is good to be mindful that, right, if we want to introduce someone like we did with cannabis, saying, okay, 5 milligrams is the recommended dose for THC, then we are going to look at, as of right now, as we have been doing historically, okay, we've gone 1 gram, 3.5 gram, 5 gram, the heroic dose, these different levels of dosing based on that user's experience. And it's not necessarily going to be a bad experience. It's just going to be different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a good point. And I did a podcast earlier today with Dr. Dustin Sulak, and we talked about mushrooms for a little while, and he integrates cannabis, ketamine, he's in Maine, different medicines. And we talked about that experience, and it's something I've noticed. I was telling him, I still will do mushrooms maybe once a year or even twice a year when I feel like I need to. But a lot of times now where I'm at, I don't want to, but I feel like I need to. And I go into some situations saying to myself, this is going to be a bad trip, because I know either I've been bullshitting myself or there's something heavy that I got to deal with. And it's going to be bad, but I know on the other side it will have been good for me. It just really opens up some things you don't want to look at sometimes. The big fear there is if you don't have the facilitator to bring you back, if you just get stuck on the bad side of not being able to accept it, and there's no integration or that other part, that piece seems like such a huge key that's going to be so important to figure out. And I'm curious of what that looks like to kind of make sure that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. And I think that's, again, why the role of the facilitator is so important. And I've seen, an outcry of people who have experienced mushrooms, but they want to experience a larger benefit or a larger dose, but they recognize that they aren't comfortable. Their setting would be unideal without someone else there to support them through that experience. Yeah. And so, now they have a chance, instead of never going for it and trying and just putting it off, having that opportunity to have the setting that they're looking for.
Yeah. I'm curious what you think about this treatment protocol, and I don't know if it'll be practical for this system, but from what I've noticed, like the first time I did mushrooms, it was a higher dose, and that's a lot to go from nothing and no experience to one of those higher doses. It really shatters a lot of things on that first go at it. And I've always thought for people, I talk to older people that are curious about it now, or I think that could be helped by it. And my thought was almost starting with a micro dose or even working up your dose into a higher level, so you don't go from 0 to hero, you go like one step at a time. But that's going to be harder to do in a system where you have to be present because it takes more time. Have you thought about that kind of like dosing protocol for new patients? Is that something that might be important?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, if you watch the movie Dosed, that was one where you get to visually watch someone who did that exact thing. They started from, they did exactly what you said. Okay. And so you can see her journey on going through that. And she used, different types of plant medicines, such as ibogaine as well. But that was an approach that they had taken. And, that's just a process, we know, and working with patients is titration. When we're working with cancer patients who want to use FICO and they're trying to get up to 1 gram a day, our outcome that we're looking for is to give them a tolerance so that they're functional. And, by doing 0.1 a day until they don't, and then, okay, you don't feel it. An hour and a half later, okay, make another 0.1. All right, now you feel it. Okay, great. There's your dose. So now we're going to try to increase that until we can get you up to 1 gram a day, because our objective there is to get as much cannabinoids in there as possible to help the battle to fight the cancer. Yeah. Now, under this, you just have to pick, well, what is your outcome here? And is it that you're trying, is this, what I think a lot of people what we battle in just the human society and race is fear and control. And we want to control so many things. And this whole experience with using cannabis with psilocybin mushrooms is to break down that control center, to tap into that psyche and really dissolve the ego so that we become at peace and realize, okay, I can, go for this and I can do that. And I am still alive. I mean, well, we know that you'd have to literally take I think it's the only recorded death was and who knows if it was just because of this, it was like 3 pounds of mushrooms. Yeah. So death isn't the worry here. Ego death can be the goal sometimes if you're trying to have a breakthrough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really brings on this acceptance or contentment afterwards. I don't know if I'll ever write a book, but I had a book. I always come up with book titles, right? And this one's kind of cheeky, but the book title would be "You're Not Good Enough and You Never Will Be." And there's an acceptance to that, right? Because now I go through life and I try hard things, but failure is okay. I'm more happy that I tried and failed than never tried at all. And once you get over that, it's a weird, almost counterintuitive way of thinking about life as, I'm not good enough, or you come to an acceptance, but it's not that cannabis stoner lazy stereotype of, well, then you just accept everything, you sit around, you don't do nothing. That's not part of it either. It actually motivates you almost to do more in a weird way while accepting failure. I was curious of your own experience and being involved with the campaign and doing so much to help push this forward. For you personally or people in your life, what was it about psilocybin that brought you into it to do this work and help kind of move this forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I didn't try it until I was about 27 or 28. So I waited some time. Yeah. I'd actually experienced DMT before I've tried any of this stuff. So I went for the most, kind of like what you described. I took a larger dose first. I went for what I was understanding is the most powerful one out there, and experienced that when I was 20 years old. And then I didn't do any hallucinogenics until 7 years later. So you can see how that was good enough for me for 7 years. And so, it wasn't until you brought the point about sometimes you hit points in life where these things call to you and they bring themselves into your life. And it's your choice to say, am I going to listen to this as a cue to guide me into a direction, or am I going to ignore this? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we listen to this. And from my experience, there was a period where going through being a pioneer in this industry and, having several years and dealing with 280E, you have eventually the IRS is going to knock on your door and, got a piece of mail saying that, you owe $512,000 to the federal government. Pay us now. We're going to seize your assets, your passport, and you can never leave the country. And that piece of mail hit me for a sec, and it was quite to digest. And then I didn't realize after I wasn't getting out of bed until 11 noon 1, and I'm like, holy crap. I think I'm depressed. And that was something I had never faced before because I saw that as a limitation, right? I was like, I wouldn't accept that this is possible, blah, blah. You start to look at these cues and you say, something is different in my life that's never happened before, and I need to address this. Mm-hmm. So that's when I met somebody who was able to educate me on the benefits of what psilocybin could offer, offered it for free and said, here, take this. It was in the form of 2.5 grams. And she educated me that if you put this in a tea using lemon, the acid base of this will convert it to psilocin, which your body will do naturally, but you end up with sometimes an upset stomach. So to avoid that, go ahead and put this in a tea, put it in with lemon, and then sit it for 15 minutes. And then you can pour your favorite, like I chose a hibiscus tea. And so I put that in there and consumed it. And the onset of those effects occurred within 15 minutes. Wow. So opposed to, waiting for your body to digest it, which could take 45 minutes to an hour or so. This happened near instantly. And so you get the effects a little bit sooner. But then afterwards, you go through your experience. And I'd set myself up and had a wonderful 4 hours of just journaling and writing and getting things that were in my head into very simple truths, as I would call them. Mm-hmm. These little messages that you lay down for yourself to say, I don't know exactly what this means, but it seems pretty profound and I really like it. So I'm going to write that or draw this. And what happened was after I came out of that experience, I felt like a newborn. I looked at the world completely differently. And I started asking myself, maybe this is happening for me. And it just gave me a completely different meaning to the circumstances I had. Instead of feeling like a victim, I felt like a superhero, because we all know the superheroes deal with some shit, and they don't just become superheroes. They have to go through a lot of pain, trauma, and significant, occurrences before they actually hit that moment. So, I went through that, and then I started microdosing with that afterwards. So I took the experience and I felt great. I didn't feel like I needed a larger dose, but then I went on to 5 days on, 2 days off. And all I started doing was looking at solutions. You could have cut off my arm and I would go, okay, I'm going to call someone because I probably can't drive with my right hand. I'm going to have them go drive me to the doctor and we're going to get there. I would just be so solution based. And that happened instantly after I had experienced the benefits of psilocybin. So, gosh, I think you asked me what's been my experience personally or other people's experience, but I want to note that one in particular because I think it's the difference between why I'm having the expansion I'm having today or going into my new building. I don't think it would have occurred because of the fear of loss I had during that time. I was very close to giving up, and that I have to say thank you to the federal government for putting those things in the mix because I might not have never tried mushrooms and not had this beautiful experience that has now allowed me to dive into this amazing plant that I believe can benefit so many people. To other people's benefits, what I find is really significant is helping PTSD for veterans in particular. They are able to, I think, dissolve some of their triggers. Again, giving it different meaning. I think that's the objective here is how can we look at our experiences that we've had in the past, whether it be childhood traumas or teenage or any adult trauma that we've dealt with and bring a different meaning to it. And that's, going into neuro-linguistic programming, the language they use, the meaning that we tell our brains. And we know that mushrooms, they dissolve the ego and they cause neuroplasticity. So they give you the opportunity to say, well, I've had these patterns for so long. I want to change and I want to take a different route to work. And maybe I want to take the scenic route today versus this I-5 that I've been going on every single day that I very dislike.
Yeah.
And more recently, I've been seeing with my father being able to overcome using pills to treat pain. He's able to treat pain using mushrooms. And so that was something I had no idea. I thought this was just a neurological mental thing, but hey, okay, it makes sense that just like THC can, antagonize CB1 receptors to block pain, we're finding that I don't know what it is in mushrooms exactly that's doing it, but something is, and he doesn't deal with knee pain anymore and he can walk and function. So
that's fascinating. It's funny when you simplify things, and doing psilocybin really makes you think in simple terms. You ask such simple questions sometimes that when you get locked in your ways, you make so many assumptions about the most basic things, the way your life works. And it's the mindset and perspective of something literally like runs your life. Like any person, someone's dealt with what you dealt with, right? And some people could have been destroyed by it, and some have a mindset of like, I overcome things. Like even if this is really negative, like I'll get through it. I'll be okay. And shifting that is, for someone, they always say like when I took like, how do you hire people? And it's like, don't hire on skills, hire on personality, their ability to work with other people, because you can teach skills, but once somebody's older, you can't teach them how to be a better communicator. Potentially, we might be able to with some of these approaches. Yeah, right? Well, it's the adversity thing. Like adversity is great for people. Like no one likes going through it, but once you get through it, it's good if you overcame it. Some people can get destroyed by it. But I've been thinking about this, and I've asked Dr. Sulik, cannabis, and we talked about kratom, or he said kratom as well, seem to really help with symptoms and people that are dealing with issues, and it can get your body back into balance, but it's more of a continual use. You can use it to get to a better place, but it's kind of step by step, where psilocybin almost feels like a mind shift that occurs, and it almost fixes more of a root cause versus the symptom of it. I have no idea how that happens, but that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. Does that resonate at all, or do you have any feelings around that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think that if we look at the control centers of our brain under the influence of psilocybin, we'll see some encouraging cerebral activity that into into areas, probably our amygdala, which controls the emotion, which ties to, our, another part of our brain that brings meaning. And so, again, going back to neuroplasticity, that's the idea of expanding the neural pathways and generating new trails. Doesn't mean that it disappeared. We still know our experiences are there, but we're going to go and try some new experiences here to try to dive into a different meaning. And so I think that the power of thought and mind controls our identities, and the way that we think and the words that we use and everything we say. Our brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not. And so we have to stand guard to the gates of our mind. And I think that mushrooms can be one of the most profound guardsmen to helping us have the tools to bring a different meaning. And I think it's so drastic. I mean, when you come out of an experience like when you are losing your ego and you overcome that and you feel, oh my gosh, I love what's on the other side. It's like, what other challenge can you bring me? It's a level up. And that thought process, when I listen to what you're saying about, if I'm never enough or I'm never going to do this, usually the truth is the antithesis of whatever we say. It's just hard to accept. Oftentimes, because we have a confirmation bias and we always look for things that confirm our current beliefs. And it's hard to say, well, I'm wrong here. But, again, mushrooms do a good job of telling you.
Yeah. I've found for myself too, it's funny because I've done a lot of hard things in life and still on a very, difficult growing a business, especially in this industry. But I've found with that feeling of, running up into challenges or going into new areas, with the psilocybin almost gives I don't know, it's kind of, I guess, going back to what we were saying before, but just being able to go through that changing that perspective, I guess here's a question around the neuroscience, and I'm not sure how much you've looked into it, but do we have any indication of how it necessarily might be working in the brain, or how it's almost like a neutral reset that allows you to pick your next path versus being stuck in that rut, right? Do we know any of the science behind that, or how that might be happening? Because it's such a profound thing, it's hard to grasp.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that there have been studies done, and John Hopkins is invested in this, and there's presentations done. So the word I just will continue to compound is neuroplasticity. The ability for you to create new neural pathways in your brain that didn't exist before, and to break down old ones so that you can create new habits and routines.
Yeah.
And you can partner that with the benefits of lion's mane, for example, and what it's caused to help with neurogenesis, to gain new brain cells. And so the more we dive into this, the more that I think we're going to learn that what we thought about, you can't have once this is the way it is, it's never going to be the way again. Once you smoke cannabis, you've killed the brain cells, they're never coming back. And the more that we find that we use these plants, I think we're finding out how we are removing those previous understandings of how our brain works. So I can't say exactly, but I know that neuroplasticity is what I understand the most, and where that occurs in the brain specifically, I'd have to look up. If the FDA is doing studies on this right now, right, it's only a few peer-reviewed articles away from understanding, and I hope to spend more time doing education on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to stay in touch, and as this develops, I'm sure it's going to evolve quickly. And from what I've seen, which is interesting, is the neuroscience. I've seen the maps, and when you take psilocybin, this area lights up or things kind of shift, and it's a way of measuring what's happening, almost like a thermometer, but not knowing why it's happening necessarily. That's kind of what my understanding was. Yeah.
Yeah. I know the image you're talking about that just basically shows here's a patient on psilocybin without, and it's just accessing so many parts of our brain that you never thought could be tapped into. It's like, oh my gosh. And I think that this is going to be, I think many psychologists and scientists and neuroscientists are going to be very intrigued by this research that's coming out.
Yeah. Yes, it is fascinating. Awesome, Brock. Well, thanks for the time. I do want to ask, was there anything we didn't hit on, or anything you feel is important that we didn't cover? There's a lot to cover here, and I'm sure we'll get back on and do it again, but anything else we missed?
No, I just encourage everyone that if you're passionate about staying involved or want to have a say or interested on how this is going to progress over the next 2 years, to follow the Oregon Health Authority website, like with House Bill 3460 and cannabis. And originally, these meetings are going to happen monthly. And if you don't want to stay on the sidelines and just hope this happens the way that you want, stay active. Stay updated on the progress of these meetings. And if there's any opportunity for public hearings or voicing public concerns, to take action in doing that over the next 2 years, this is going to be the time to see once these rules are in place, they will be. So I just encourage everyone to stay active, involved, and hope we can craft this the best interest of our people.
Absolutely. Well, exciting times. And thanks again, Brock, for sharing with our listeners. And really appreciate your time, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Wayne.
Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the podcast. If you'd like to support the work we do and receive a great product in the process, you can buy from one of our edible companies where we make everything in-house. Periodiccaramels.com is our hemp butter CBD caramel line, ships across the country. Or if you're in Oregon, you can get our higher THC cannabis caramels. You can find those at periodicedibles.com. We've got links here and here, and then down in the description as well. Thank you for watching.